They see dehydration. Then I heard an Israeli trade envoy yesterday going, oh, they keep saying they're starving, but, where are they starving? Like, she needs to see people dead of starvation, does she, in order to prove to her that what the regime is doing. I mean, it's beyond disproportionate. It hasn't achieved their war aims. The head of Hamas don't even exist in Gaza. They're elsewhere. This is just totally counterproductive. It's a war they're not winning. It's a people they're massacring. It's absolutely destroying Israel's reputation internationally.
Now, that's my Where Politics Meets History co-host Tessa Dunlop, and you can hear our full conversation by subscribing on Global Player or the brand new LBC app. Well, in the next hour, it's Tuesday's Cross Question, and joining me on the panel are Baroness Arlene Foster, Chair of Intertrade UK, which promotes trade across the UK, and also a non-affiliated peer, and of course former Northern Irish First Minister. Natasha Irons is making her debut on the programme, Labour MP for Croydon East. Jack Elsom is the new political editor of The Sun, or relatively new anyway. And McElvoy is executive editor of Politico Europe and also the co-host of the podcast Politics at Sam and Anne's. I'm sure she got the job because it rhymes with Sam. That had to be, didn't it, given her predecessor? Exactly. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call if you'd like to put a question to our panel.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, Ozzy Osbourne has died at the age of 76. His family say they were with him this morning when he died and that he was surrounded by love. John Robb, editor of the music website Louder Than War, told LBC he was a national treasure.
Everybody kind of knows who Ozzy was. And it's great he got that kind of level of fame, and worldwide as well. Let's not forget how huge he was in America. But he almost overshadows his contribution, really, because I think Black Sabbath are one of the great bands. And he also had a really great voice as well. People don't talk about his artistry, and there was an artistry.
A report into historical fraud allegations at the Unite Union says its former boss enjoyed flights on private jets and football tickets. It claims they were arranged and paid for by a company which was building a hotel and conference centre for the union. Both Len McCluskey and the Flanagan Group have been approached for comment. 5 days of strikes by resident doctors in England will go ahead from Friday after talks ended with no agreement. Members of the British Medical Association are walking out over pay. And the Lionesses could become the first England team to make it to 3 consecutive major finals. They've got Italy in the semi-finals of the Euros tonight. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 10 points at 90.23. The pound buys $1.35 and €1.15. LBC weather, isolated showers tonight, more frequent in the southwest of Wales and England, a low of 11 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's 3 minutes past 8 on LBC. Welcome to Tuesday's Cross Question. On the panel with me, to my left, Baroness Arlene Foster, former Northern Irish First Minister, now chairs Intertrade UK. We'll find out what that is in a few moments' time. And she's also a non-affiliated peer in the House of Lords. Next to her is Anne McElvoy, executive editor of Politico Europe and the co-host of the podcast Politics at Jack and Anne's. To my
even
right,
Sam and Anne's.
I'm so sorry, Sam and Anne's. Would you like to take over as a presenter of this program?
I've just literally put in my application.
Well, Corey would happily have you, I'm sure. To my right, we have Natasha Irons, who is Labour MP for Croydon East. Have I got that right?
You have, absolutely.
Thank goodness for that. She's making her debut on the programme tonight. And next to her, the new political editor of The Sun, Jack Elsom. They're here to take your calls, 0345 6060 973. You can WhatsApp on that number. You can text 84850. And, of course, you can watch us on Global Player and the LBC app.
Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Cross Question with Iain Dale. This is LBC.
Right, let's go to Chris in Richmond for our first question. Chris, very good evening. What would you like to ask?
Evening panel, evening Iain. If we do not see a very quick solution to the small boats crisis, will we end up with a summer of discontent in the United Kingdom?
And we've got a similar question from Jason on a WhatsApp saying, does the panel fear an imminent civil unrest? That's James in Hitchin. Jack?
I think there's a real risk of that because there is a simmering anger out there in the public. Obviously, most notably, that has coalesced around the Bell Hotel in Epping over the past few weeks about illegal migration. I don't think anybody would condone the actions of some mindless thugs who are whipping up hatred, and especially when you're making a point about law and order, I don't think it's helpful and undermines the genuine concerns of a lot of the peaceful protesters there. Many of them women who I think are becoming increasingly scared on the streets, scared for their children.
And that's the problem when, if you, I mean, he was the first one to tell us all about the small boats in the Channel. Nobody else had covered it. No other journalist had. It was him that sort of alerted us to that back in 2017 or whatever it was. So he would...
That's where we need to start. It isn't just about people coming in and out. It's about what is happening on the ground in our communities.
Arlene Foster.
Yeah, I think...
Foster.
Yeah, I think the point about social cohesion is very well made because if people feel that there are different groups living separately in a community, then the fear starts to come in. And I think what some of the communities outside of London, and actually in London as well, but the point that Nigel Farage was making was that, you know, people in Westminster don't actually know what's happening in the rest of the country. And there is a disconnect between what is happening in the rest of the country and the bubble, which is Westminster. And that's not a new thing. That's been going on for years and years. And I mean, people didn't think Brexit was going to happen because the people in Westminster weren't going to vote for Brexit. But actually, the people in the country did. And we got what we got. So I think there's a general feeling in some communities out there of hopelessness. And people feel that they don't have a voice. And the only way that they can get a voice is actually to protest and to go out onto the streets. And I think Jack's right. You know, you cannot equate that with people who will come along and try to make trouble out of that, because I think we do need to listen to the people who are genuinely saying there's a problem here and we don't feel as if we're being listened to. And I have to say, Iain, that's really concerning given that this government is only 1 year old, you know, that's how they feel. And they put a lot of hope in a change of government. And now they're saying, it's not happening. So what are we going to do? We're going to go out onto the streets and we're going to protest. And coming from where I come from, I know that can turn nasty at times. And Natasha mentioned social media and people looking at social media. Unfortunately, social media allows people to organise in a very fast way and to get ahead. And I think there's a really worrying sense that things are going to happen over the summer.
Yeah, I think I agree with Arlene on that. I have just one point where I feel that we were in danger almost of leaning into this narrative that something is going to happen in the way that you then actually help bring it about. You may not intend to, but if you give it sort of saying, well, it's inevitable, isn't it? It was like, okay, well, we better get out there then, because, you know, not suggesting that your wonderful listeners to Muse and LBC would respond in that way. But I think, there is a phenomenon.
Jack's front page the other day, I mean, you were quoting Nigel Farage, I can't remember the exact words. It was either yesterday or the day before, where you were quoting Nigel Farage about the fact that there could be unrest. And I mean, there was a bit of comment about that, saying, well, doesn't that stoke it up? So it's not just politicians. I think it's the media have got...
Oh, no, completely. I mean, let me sort of finish where I was going to go with that then. So I wasn't certainly saying, oh, well, that means like nothing will happen or to talk it down. I'm just pointing out that you get into a kind of call and response in the where you start saying, well, it's going to happen. Then something terrible happens. We hope it's, it's peaceful, as Jack says, but maybe it won't be. There is this deep underlying frustration that I think we've all put our fingers on. I would say to Natasha, I mean, if your answer is, please, can we go back to the era before 10-second social media clips, that's not going to happen.
No,
so if we don't have politics...
So that wasn't what I was saying.
But you said that this wasn't helpful, etc., and that may be true, but these are the waters in which modern politicians swim. And this is the waters in which this kind of debate will take place. And we saw it... I mean, there's still a bit of an argument after Southport about how much is sort of driven by that social media ecology, which can be very harmful, can be very toxic, and how much that then actually is just, it's reflecting things that are there already. I imagine it's, you can put different proportions on that. But it is really important, I think, for our politicians who do tend to be a bit analogue in a digital world, not to sort of say, well, you know what, this format. I mean, an AI will be the next bit that they're going to have to live in the world that we live in, and it is much more reactive. It can be distressing. I often find it sort of distressing myself, as you see arguments not being reflected in their entirety. And we should do our best and be publicly responsible as journalists and politicians, policymakers. But we're not going back to an era when
I don't think I wasn't arguing to go back to a time when we didn't have social media, and I hope that that's not what was taken from what I said. What I was trying to just talk about is that if we want to talk about genuine social cohesion, it is not just about numbers on coming in and out. It is about actually what does that look like on the ground, and what to me, my experience of social cohesion is actually when you get people in a room together, or when you have things within communities. So you have community spaces that councils can afford to run, where people can actually come together as communities and discuss and meet their neighbours and understand what's going on. Look, during the pandemic, obviously we were physically detached from each other, but when you looked at things like those COVID response things in the communities, or the WhatsApp groups that popped up, there was a sense there that we were all in something together and we were all supporting each other.
But you see, I don't really agree that that's possible in this situation, or indeed what it's about. I have to be quite honest with you. I have a difference of opinion with you, which is really as follows. The reason that Angela Rayner was very frank in that readout that Jack and everybody has picked up on that. Angela Rayner is very smart to make sure that comes out. What people, I think, who are angry but just not, they're not just doing it for the sake of it to be difficult or to be antagonistic, is they think that the Labour Party and others, if you like, the bubble as Iain described it, and including, in fact, the centre-right as well, didn't really take this seriously at all, and now they take it seriously because they're in a panic. That's what they really think, and they're not wrong. I mean, the number of people who told me, even a couple of years ago, who are now very prominent in the government, but I wouldn't say it's only about the Labour Party. I think it was a phenomenon of the centre of politics, that this was all exaggerated. What had it got to do? It didn't even affect voters in the north. It was a bit like, I remember once they actually realised that it did affect the way that voters thought they were treated. The tune has changed, and that is good, but I'm afraid they did not start out thinking we must do something about this. They started out thinking this is flounder.
I don't know. Sorry, I'm sorry. I have to come back on that, because I think during the election, Labour we were very clear about trying to get a hold of the out of control. No, that was in our manifesto, it was in our election campaign. It wasn't something that just came out of nowhere. But I think
But it was all about smash the gangs, wasn't it?
Well, it's all about being practical and trying to find a solution to this. At the moment, the solutions we have to try something different. The things we were trying before simply were not working. And also, if we're going to...
It's got worse. It's 50% up in a year. The crossings.
The crossings, but we've also deported 35,000 people. 35,000
a lot of them are voluntary,
and more than the 4 volunteers that went to Rwanda.
No, I'm not a defender of the Rwanda plan in its entirety. But the fact when you talk about deportations the whole time, lots of them are voluntary, most of them are foreign national offenders. They don't release the amount of small boat deportations because they know it would be embarrassing to them. Since 2018, 3% of small boat crossers have been deported from this country. I'm not sure it's going to be significantly up more than Labour.
And we have managed at least to have a conversation with France about a returns agreement. It is the starting of this. Nobody said this was going to be fixed overnight, that we were completely transparent about that. That's that conversation around a decade of national renewal. That's for a reason, because after 14 years of a system that has collapsed, it takes time to build back. Now, where communities feel left behind, that is a completely legitimate concern, and I think it doesn't take 10 seconds to even walk around some communities in London.
Right, I do have to go. I'd love to continue this without a break, but we do have to go to a break. But we've got a couple of questions allied to it, so we'll continue the discussion in just a moment. It's 17 minutes past 8.
This is LBC. Leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
18 minutes past 8 here. Jack Elsom is here, political editor of The Sun. Natasha Irons, Labour MP for Croydon East. Any relation to Jeremy?
No.
Just thought I'd ask.
Not that I'm aware of. I don't maybe need to on who do you think you are?
Well, there you go. And McElvoy from Politico and the co-host of the podcast Politics at Sam and Anne's. I got it right.
Got it.
And Dame Arlene Foster, chair of Intertrade UK. What is Intertrade UK?
So Intertrade UK was a body that was set up by government after the long drawn-out Brexit negotiations in terms of Northern Ireland after safeguarding the union. It's there to promote trade internally within the UK so that there's no barriers, but to also deal with any barriers that come up and report into government about those.
But how will this new deal that Keir Starmer's done affect Intertrade?
Well, as you know, the SPS agreement, which we're hoping will come about, will help with some of the food moving into Northern Ireland from Great Britain. Goodness, I've got a flashback of Sausagegate when Boris was in charge. It just came into my head there. But there was a real problem around the SPS agreement, so that hasn't came about yet, but hopefully that will help ease some of the problems that are there. But there are still problems around manufactured goods that move from Great Britain into Northern Ireland, and we have to try and work those out.
Right, I'm going to combine two questions here. One is a WhatsApp question from Scott, who says, will sanctions against people smugglers make any difference towards stopping the boats, given that these smugglers are not in the UK and have no assets in Britain? And Kevin in Basingstoke has called in. Kevin, what's your question?
Hi, Ian. We're constantly told that we've got an immigration problem, but we have a declining birth rate, an ageing population. It won't be long where there's going to be more people reaching retirement age than working age. Immigrants an asset, not a problem.
So basically, do we need more immigration, I suppose? Arlene?
Well, first of all, there's a couple of issues there. The people smugglers, I think the point that has been made is absolutely right. I mean, people smugglers are not going to have assets in the UK, are they? I mean, they're trying to make money and money launder it away to some other jurisdiction. So that's not really going to have an impact, in my opinion. And I think the point that the first questioner made was, can we deal with the small boats quickly? And Natasha's already indicated, is this going to take a long time? What people have to believe in is that something is actually happening, and at the moment they don't think that things are happening because they look at the last government. Rwanda scheme didn't go ahead once this government came in. There were promises to smash the gang from this government. That hasn't happened as well. So they need to have a belief that things are happening and that the numbers are coming down. They don't have that at the moment. And to the point from Kevin about do we not need immigration to deal with our ageing population? Yes, we do, but it has to be of a sort where we're having skilled people coming in to help in the areas where we need to fill those jobs. And we've always had that. We've always had people coming to this country to help with those skills and to help us to live our lives. But what we don't need are people coming in who are dependent on the state for their well-being and not actually contributing to society.
Anne?
Well, it's interesting, the question about sanctions, because clearly it's not going to hit people who are coming over here to doing illegal work and effectively illegal trafficking in the boats. But I think the argument is that there are people, and there are people you can find in companies and shell companies behind them. You know, they're not, and maybe this is something we've learned along the way. I've certainly have, and I've looked at the problem in Germany as well. It's very related. Some of the gangs are interrelated. The source of some of the boats, which seems to be, of the inflatables, seems to be a lot in Turkey. It's also why it was in the Merz Starmer agreement. I was at the press conference last week with the German Chancellor and the Prime Minister. So I think the aim there is to get governments who can align in some way. And Natasha, we were talking earlier about France. Germany is also very important here. Obviously, we talk more in France because it's directly opposite us, and the boats come from there. To basically apply sanctions where you can and where you can find people who stand behind this. It is a slow process, that is true, but I think that's reasonable. I mean, if you talk about smashing the gangs, I don't think we only mean the guys in the boats. We mean the people who profit from the guys in the boats. It's a long way round. It's a bit like trying to use sanctions, and I've studied a lot on Russia over Ukraine. But I do think it's part of the picture. I don't think it's an unreasonable thing to say. On the second point, yes, I think there's a lot of observation at the moment that we need more people to pay pensions, etc. I'm also a bit worried about that argument, particularly as we go into an age of AI, where actually finding the right jobs and allocating people enough jobs to really feel that that's what they expect out of their lives. I think the sort of demographic argument that you just need lots and lots more people and then they'll go to work and then pay your pensions might itself have some holes in it. I think you want a healthy, and a motivated and a robust society. Not terribly sure that the answer is always you can have smaller populations that can very effectively run towards their pension schemes. So it always seems to me, I have a slight feeling that it's taking us towards some sort of birth narrative that may not be entirely healthy in where it's coming from.
Okay, Natasha.
So I think it's not about not having immigration, it's about having controlled immigration. It's about fairness. If we will always need people to come here. My family came here with Windrush to, work in the NHS and help this country get back on its feet after World War II. And I'm, grateful for the opportunities that's afforded our family. But it's about leveraging the talent that we have coming in to ensure that the young people growing up here can be trained and skilled up. And it's not about using immigration as a sticking plaster for our own deficiencies in certain industries. We have to leverage those skills to train up.
That's what we have been doing, isn't it, for decades?
Well, that's what we're trying to change with our plan for change. And that, when you look
Got
at
it in there.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah,
I'll be happy number 10 tonight.
And only one mention of 14 years so far.
Well, there's still time. But I think, in all seriousness, we have to. That has been a short-term sort of answer for the labour shortages we've had, for not investing in the skills and for not having an industrial strategy. And part of that decade of renewal is looking at how do you allow industries to bring in talent, but to leverage that talent to train up our young people. We cannot continue to have young people that are out of work or feel like opportunities do not belong to them. We were talking about communities that are left behind now. I don't think, as a Londoner, that people should have to leave the small towns and villages that they grew up in to find the jobs that they want to do. People should grow up and live where they grew up, next to their families and in their own communities. We have to ensure that opportunity is spread across the country. And immigration will allow us to leverage that talent, but it has to be controlled and it has to be fair. And I think that's what we're working towards, and it is going to take time.
Just on that point, which is slightly going off the subject, but I think it's an interesting one about people not being able to live in the areas that they grew up in. I mean, Arlene, you've seen this in Northern Ireland, haven't you, where you've had huge numbers of young Irish people, in fact, in the south as well, coming over to the UK, particularly to London. Is that changing, though? Because I get the feeling that more younger people are staying put in Northern Ireland and the south.
Well, I think the southern story was obviously in the 50s and 60s when the Republic's economy was in a very poor place and a lot of people came to London, and you know that now from the Irish communities right across London. In Northern Ireland, when I was growing up, very few of us stayed for our tertiary education in Northern Ireland. The feeling was, let the young people go away to England, Scotland and Wales and escape the troubles that were going on at that particular point in time. A lot of those people found jobs, found partners and didn't come back to Northern Ireland, and that was a real problem, the brain drain as we called it. But actually now, since COVID and since the sort of pattern of work that's developed now, where you can be in the office for 3 days, work from home for 2 days, be with a London company but work at home, that all has changed, and actually there are more people living, because of the quality of life, let's be honest, which people can achieve in Northern Ireland but they still want obviously the good jobs, but they can actually live now in Northern Ireland, which I think is a really good thing.
Jack?
Which one should I say? One of the immigration ones?
Both of them.
I'll take the sanctions one. Listen, I think that it is obviously a noble desire to go after these people smuggling gangs, and I do not doubt Keir Starmer's sincerity when he says he genuinely loathes them, because I think that he does. I think that this latest crackdown suffers the same flaw as the rest of them, which is that at its heart, it is incredibly difficult in itself to flush out these people smuggling gangs, because they are ruthless, they are ingenious, and they are very, very good at what they do. And a bit like the drug trade, tens of billions of pounds through over the decades has been poured into smashing the drug trade, and it is easy as it is than ever to get a bag of weed on the street corner, speaking hypothetically. But I think that while you should go after them, because I don't think that it is something which you shouldn't do, I think it has to be a two-pronged attempt. You have to have some attempt to smash the people smuggling gangs, fine, but you have to have a deterrent. And I think without that, the whole plan is doomed to fail. And the deterrent is reducing pull factors and increasing deportations. So you can't come here and work in the underground economy. And if you come here illegally, then you will be on a plane home very, very quickly if possible. Now, that is not always possible because a lot of the times you don't know the nationality of people that come over here because they chuck away their passports. Sometimes they even stub out their fingerprints with cigarette butts so that you can't do biometric tests on them. And so you don't even know where to deport them back to. And that is where the Tories obviously came up with Rwanda, because you had a third option to deport them to. Now, you can debate the merits of Rwanda. You can say it couldn't have been scaled up. But the idea of having some sort of returns hub, which Keir Starmer has finally come round to, I think that has to be really where you go after, because unless you do that, unless you have somewhere to deport the people you can't deport back to their home countries, then you're just going to get a crisis which keeps on perpetuating.
And what about the idea of we need more immigration to help with our ageing society?
I think Britain is always going to need immigrants in some parts. I think that you also need to get the people who currently are not working in this country and mobilise them to do lots of jobs, because immigration does cause a strain on public services, on local communities. And also we need to make sure that the immigrants that come over here are genuinely working. We had stats last week showing that 1.3 million migrants are on some form of universal credit. Half of them are not working. I don't think that is something the British people are going to accept for much longer. You're always going to need immigration to fill some sort of jobs. Best, brightest, the rest of it. 906,000 in 2023, that is too much.
That has come down substantially.
Yeah,
it has. I thought I'd say that for
Thank you so much. I'll pay you later.
It has come down.
It has.
But it's going to settle around 300,000. That is still a city.
But the point is, I think
every single year,
picking
which
up
is
on
very
some
big.
of the points you raised, this is a rate, one of many measures. And the question I would ask is, why wouldn't you do this? Why wouldn't you put sanctions on people that have profited from an industry that has sprung up because of this situation where we couldn't return people to France, this cottage industry that has turned into a global organised crime? So I think trying to tackle that is one thing we can do. Ensuring that people who are here have the right to be here is another thing we can do. So the thing around pull factors, going in and ensuring that people who are working in the underground jobs market are tackled and deported, is also something this government is doing. And look, you've got to remember, this is almost starting from zero because this work wasn't happening before. So to get these things up and running has taken time and is starting to bite and take hold. We now need to ensure that those people thinking of coming over on boats understand that those pull factors are no longer easy.
Do you think that Yvette Cooper, before the election, and Keir Starmer should have been more honest about that then? Because they said to the electorate, we have a ready-made plan to come in and smash the gangs. At the moment, no gangs have really been smashed from what I can see, because the fact that crossings were up 50%, they were under the Tories.
I guess you and I will have a very different view on whether or not they were honest. I think we've been patently honest. I remember knocking on doors and telling people this would take time. Nobody ever said this would be solved within a year. But
it did seem the government sold people the land of milk and honey, and it was things are going to get better very quickly. We don't have a ready-made plan to smash the gangs.
The government honestly said we have a plan to tackle the illegal gangs that are doing this. Peddling this foul trade. That is the plan that is in action now. That is what is being implemented. That is the promise that was made. And so I think we have to really give this time to bed in, and we really do need to sort of understand, as everybody understands, this took a long time to grow up. This industry took a long time to get hold. It's going to take a long time to dismantle.
Right, we've got another half an hour. Lots of time for more of your questions. 0345 6060 973. You're listening to Cross Question on LBC. It's 8:32. News headlines with Daryl Jackson.
Black Sabbath frontman Ozzy Osbourne has died at the age of 76. The news comes just 2.5 weeks after their final show in Birmingham. A family statement says he died surrounded by love this morning. Strikes by resident doctors in England are going ahead after failing to reach any agreement with the Health Secretary. Members of the British Medical Association are walking out for 5 days from Friday in a row over pay, which Wes Streeting has described as reckless. Kemi Badenoch says the appointment of Sir James Cleverley to her front bench is about bringing back experience. The former Home and Foreign Secretary will take on the shadow housing brief following the Tory leader's reshuffle. LBC weather: cloudy with some light rain in the northwest of Scotland tonight. Isolated showers elsewhere, but more frequent in southwest Wales and England. A low of 11 degrees.
LBC. Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
Let me reintroduce my panel. We have Baroness Arlene Foster with us, former Northern Ireland First Minister, Natasha Irons, the new Labour MP for Croydon East, Jack Elsom, political editor of The Sun. How have you found, I know you were deputy before, but actually being the political editor of The Sun, that is always seen as one of the best jobs in journalism.
It's tremendous fun. I've been in the job for about 6 weeks, so that's felt like about 6 years. Because I started on the week of the spending review, and then we had grooming gangs and World War III and welfare rebellions and the rest of it, but it is enormous fun. And it's a privilege to do it every single day.
And I don't think, is it stepping in the shoes of Harry Cole? Because Harry was a real character.
Yeah, he was.
I'm not saying
Absolutely.
you're not, but...
No, oh my goodness me. Absolutely enormous shoes to fill, an enormous wine glass to fill at the same time. I haven't done what Harry used to do, which was have a few glasses of wine on the terrace and then sort of come past the red line and have a few more glasses there and then walking to the LBC studio. I've only had a few tipples at the number 10 party tonight, but no.
I saw you at that party.
We did, yeah.
And you had a non-alcoholic drink in your hand.
Well, that's because, Ian, I saw you were watching, and then after you left, the wine did flow.
So did the rain. We have Anne McElvoy here. She's co-host of Politics at Sam and Anne's, the podcast for Politico. And let's go to the next question. It is a text question from Archie in Inverness. Consultants can earn as much as £3,000 for covering just one night's shift of a resident doctor. Has the medical profession joined private businesses in feasting on the dying carcass that is the NHS? Now, just as a bit of background to this, consultants can expect to be paid some £3,700 for covering just one 13-hour night shift during strikes, or £3,250 for a daytime shift. Anne?
Well, if they have to be there, somebody has to be there to cover it. I mean, it's very regrettable, and I think this is also a knock-on effect of the stance that I don't mean to say junior doctors in any sort of sense. My family hate being called junior doctors. They're in that sort of the group that thinks that they have been badly treated, and they over time, their awards have fallen. But this way of going about it basically means they are taking money out of the front line of the NHS because this has to be covered. People have to be incentivised to do it, and the incentives need to be strong. So that's where all that money is going to be spent. I do think it is a sign of a grave malfunction, both within the profession and the breakdown of the talks. But I have to say, on the whole, I'm on the side of Wes Streeting. I mean, he could not deliver everything overnight in terms of raising pay in the NHS. You've gone pretty far in the first year to show goodwill. There may have been a degree of naivety that you could buy off these strikes, but at least now, having got the message, one thing I admire about Wes Streeting is when he gets a message, he's quite quick to turn and act. He doesn't just keep using the old talking points. He's said this is reckless. I think he's broadly right. I'm a big reformer of the NHS. I don't agree with the statement about the dying carcass of the NHS. I mean, I was like, when metaphors go that way, I sort of reach for my reality check a bit in. The fact is the NHS is going to have to change. There's good stuff in the 10-year plan. There's stuff that I wish was in it and a bit more urgent that didn't make it in there. It is going to be a very different health service. It needs to be delivered differently. It needs absolute technological overhaul. It won't happen overnight, but it needs to happen fast, and it needs to happen faster. That, to me, is how you end up with a more sustainable workforce, because at the moment, the idea that you can simply become more and more sort of highly paid human beings and train more doctors, you have to change the way that the NHS works into how services are delivered, treat more people at home, etc. There's so many fantastic advances in medicine, and a lot of them are actually in and around the NHS. But you're not going to do it just by paying people more in strikes.
Jack, let's concentrate on the consultants issue, because we've got another question about the junior doctor strike coming up.
Yeah, well, again, it's difficult to get away from the fact that if these strikes are happening, then people are going to have to fill them. The NHS has said that they want to keep as many appointments going as possible. The BMA saying that's risking public safety. But I think in the minds of patients who are having their appointments cancelled or risk having their appointments cancelled, they'd probably rather have some sort of consultant cover, even though that's going to cost a ludicrous amount, and taxpayers are going to be pretty agog at the figure which they're earning. But I think at the moment it's probably the lesser of two evils, because if you have no consultants whatsoever, then it's going to be incredibly difficult period for the NHS. But I know we're going to talk about it later, but I think that probably this lies at the feet of the BMA, who I think have behaved pretty disgracefully with this, and I think that the public also are starting to lose patience with them. A YouGov poll today showed that only about a third of people support these strikes. Last time it happened, it's probably a bit of a majority, but now the public is losing patience, I think.
Arlene?
Yeah, I think Policy Exchange brought out a document yesterday which said it was 250,000 appointments are going to be cancelled as a result of what's happening. And if you're one of the people that has been waiting for one of those appointments, that is really, really poor. And I just have to say the BMA, in a whole range of issues, have behaved quite badly recently, and I think this is the latest. And it is really poor, and I can understand the public's annoyance at the amount of money the consultants are going to get paid for cover. But what's the other answer? I mean, there's no other answer. You have to have cover when people are ill or when people come up against emergency situations. So the government are now going to have to deal with that. But again, I have to say it's the power of the trade unions as well, because I do agree with Anne. The NHS is not a sacred cow. It needs to be reformed to deliver for the 21st century. My goodness, we're 2 decades into the 21st century. We need to have an NHS that's fit for purpose, and that means reform. And the unions have always resisted reform, whether it's in Northern Ireland, believe me, I have the stripes on that one, or here on the mainland. There needs to be reform, and they should get on the bus and be a part of it. I was
going to ask you about the NHS in Northern Ireland, because it very rarely gets a mention, this side of the RSC. I mean, do you in Northern Ireland face exactly the same problems as the NHS in England?
We do, although slightly different. We have very long waiting times. We've, I think, the worst waiting times in the whole of the UK, and I say that, I mean, it really does give me a sense of shame when I do say that. But for a long time, we've been talking about reform in Northern Ireland. We had an expert come in from Spain to do a report, the Bengoa report, to look at a different configuration of the NHS in Northern Ireland. The Assembly collapsed. We didn't get it delivered. And we're now still in a situation where nearly half of the budget of Stormont goes to the health department. Over half of the budget in Stormont goes to the health department, which is just not sustainable.
Well, on that bombshell, Natasha?
Yeah. Well, as everybody has said, what's the alternative here? The priority now needs to be trying to protect patients and ensure that the NHS continues to tick over as these strikes continue. From my understanding, Wes has done everything, from my view, well. He's constructively had conversations with them. He did deliver a very large pay rise for the doctors, acknowledging the pressure they've been under the last decade. But there has to come with that change to the service, and that's exactly what Wes has been talking about this entire time, changing the NHS and how it behaves, and ensuring that we're talking about prevention, that we're taking things out of hospital, because treatment in the community is cheaper than treatment into hospitals, keeping people well for longer, and trying to make it much more patient focused. And I'm very proud of the work he's done, and I'm very proud of the way he's conducted himself in this. And it's a
well, he's certainly
disappointment.
been fairly trenchant in his comments tonight, isn't he?
Well, I think there comes a point where you sort of just have to tell it like it is. And he's been very constructive, I think, and very open to dialogue and done everything in his power, from my view of it.
What did you make of the leaked WhatsApp messages from one of the senior resident doctors in the BMA, where they said that these were from last year, before the election, where they said, well, we won't strike immediately after the election because Labour will be really popular then. We won't get very far. So we'll leave it a bit until they're not very popular, and then we'll launch strike action. I mean, how cynical is that?
Well, I mean, I have to confess, I didn't see that, but that is really cynical, and it hasn't got them anywhere. And public support has waned because the public can see that you've got, that there has to be a limit to things. And the NHS isn't just doctors. There's a range of workforce that support the NHS, and this is about bringing everyone along on the journey to change it.
Let's bring up a follow-up question here from Kieran in Bromley, who says, is the confirmation of the junior doctors' strikes on Friday proof that negotiations with trade unions are futile unless the chequebook makes an appearance at the table too? And I suppose this is the reference to the fact that West Streeting has been talking about working conditions rather than pay, something he probably can deliver on. Jack?
I think that Wes Streeting is a very lucky general here, because there was a scenario in which he ended up looking very, very silly. He's obviously closed his chequebook, which I think is the right thing to do. But I think that there were two things which could have really slipped him up. The first was that after giving that 22% pay rise last year, many people said they'll just be back for more. If you gave them a big pay rise last time, they'll come out cap in hand. And he said, no, of course they won't. They know it's a one-time offer only, and it's going to get back to sort of around inflation level pay in the coming years. He looks a bit silly now, the fact they haven't done that. The second point, I think, of contention is the fact that when there were strikes under the Tories, Wes Streeting was on the airwaves at any given opportunity saying, if only these damn Tories would just get in the room and negotiate, they could solve these strikes. When we get in, the grown-ups are going to be in charge and we're going to solve them. That hasn't happened. I do think, though, in this scenario, it's going to play in his favour because the public are now losing faith with the BMA, and actually Wes Streeting comes out very cleverly and very quickly, as he has done tonight, accusing them of being reckless, saying they're putting public safety at risk, saying that he's not going to give them any more money because there is no more money, they don't deserve any more money. I think that actually is going to pay off for him in a political sense. Negotiating with trade unions, they're always going to want more money. And you can talk about working conditions, but it's going to come down to broad facts.
I'm going to have to ask you all to be quite brief on this because we do need to go to a break, Arlene.
Well, I mean, I worry about the Employment Rights Bill and where that is heading now in terms of trade union rights, because that's going to give trade unions even more rights. And this sends a very negative message, in my view, to trade unions right across our sectors. And we know the way in which the economy is going at the moment, and it's not good. We need to actually be talking about reform of the legislation and not bringing in the legislation that's currently, unfortunately, going through the House of Lords.
Anne?
One thing I think was a mistake, and Jack has referred to it, I think Wes Streeting acted in good faith, but for instance, when this similar sort of deal was done in Germany with the doctors, basically they did get a nice big amount of money after the pandemic to sort of thank them, but also to make up where they had lost earnings. But it was absolutely on a deal that there wouldn't be anything for 2 years. It was literally written into the deal. That was negotiated with the trade unions. Now, their trade unions are often a bit more pliable than some, but it's funny that we think about the BMA, which is sort of thinks of itself or presents itself as a professional association. Frankly, there are probably a lot of doctors who don't feel well represented by this way of doing it. So I think that was one mistake, but that's in the rearview mirror. I think you could also there are other ways, the checkbook analogy, you can to put more money into pensions and say, okay, you're not going to get your money now. We can't afford to do that now, but here, how about the government will support you putting more money into your pensions. I mean, there's lots of flexibility, but you do have to lay that out, right? The unions aren't going to come to you and go, do you know what, we'll be a bit flexible down the line. I think there was probably a bit of a reality check there for Wes Streeting.
Natasha?
Well, I think trade unions have protected workers' rights for a very long time, and I'm personally very pleased to see the Workers' Rights Bill go through and seeing the biggest uplift of workers' rights in a generation. In this instance, where good faith negotiations have not worked, I think what we're seeing in Wes Streeting is somebody who will defend the service he's in charge of, and the WhatsApp messages you were talking about and that cynical move, I don't believe all trade unions behave that way. I think there are negotiations to be had, and negotiations happen with trade unions all the time across multiple spaces, and we don't have mass strikes. I think with this situation, it's really disappointing that BMA have continued down this line, and Wes is doing the right thing.
OK, lots more to come on Cross Question, including our famed fun question at the end of the programme, which I know Natasha in particular is looking forward to. It's 8:48.
This is LBC. Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
8:50 on LBC. We have a bit of a good final question, a fun question for you. But before we get to that, I want to ask Anne McElvoy about her podcast, Politics at Sam and Anne's. So you're at Anne's.
It's like a reality show.
He's at Sam's.
Yes. First thing in the morning.
You record it first thing in the morning, remotely.
Mm-hmm. Basically, so Sam is in his house, I'm in mine. One of us is usually a little bit more groggy from the night before than the other, but we get through it. And what we do is we work about an hour before we start recording the podcast. We look at everything that's happened overnight. He brings in stories.
What time do you have to get up to do this?
5 o'clock.
Oh my God.
5 o'clock.
You're mad.
And thank you. And also, it's worse, as we all know, the podcast is now becoming visualised as well. So not only do you have to sit there, being awake, but you also have to look a bit awake. But actually we do. We've got Politico, my colleagues at Politico, that amazing playbook that we do around, has all the stories overnight that the political you need if you're interested in politics, either working or just that interested in it. So we grab all the best bits of our colleagues' hard work. And then we add some of our own analysis and wanderings in Westminster and insights and analysis. And I read because I'm a foreign correspondent by background, so I read the Kremlin website. And on a slow day, we talk about the Kremlin website. But, we do try to mix up what's going to happen in the day ahead, trying to get that right. Hope we mainly do.
So this morning, you would have been talking about Kemi Badenoch's
So we talked about the reshuffle.
Well, funnily enough, Anthony in Ashford wants to talk about that too. So go ahead, Anthony.
He's a perfect new listener.
Yes.
Anthony, you there?
Does the panel think that Kemi Badenoch somewhat shot herself in the foot by not waiting for Starmer's reshuffle, doing her reshuffle today?
Anne?
Not for that reason. No, I think it's you run your own firm and you do it when you're ready to do it. I was a bit perplexed by it. We did it early on the podcast. At which point we thought, well, there might be a bit of a role for Francis Maud, but that's not really going to set the world on fire. But actually, I think bringing Cleverley back was an interesting move, and also that he was prepared to come back in. We're still a bit concerned. We don't really understand the constellation. Like, what does this mean for what's the role of Robert Jenrick? They brought back James Cleverley. He's a great talent. coming, but into a role clearly to oppose Angela Rayner. So that is the idea. It could. We hope it will be blockbuster, because that'd be good for all of our podcasts and shows, and also for the Commons, for entertainment, for Natasha. But it's you do slightly wonder though, where's the strategy? And I know we're guilty of often saying this a lot about the government, but I think it's a fair question to push about Kemi Badenoch as well, which is, yes, this is quite clever. It's really nice. You got James Cleverley back. A lot of people warm to him, but it's like, but what does it mean? Like, what are you trying to say about the future of the Conservative Party? So I was surprised that maybe the reshuffle didn't go further.
Okay,
myself,
Arlene.
This is a classic Westminster bubble moment, isn't it?
Yeah, very.
Because everybody out in the country, nobody's saying, well, what about the strategy of the Tory party in terms of putting James Cleverley there?
We're nerds.
Do you know what? I don't think most people care about this. They want to see a Conservative party that's taking opposition seriously. Does James Cleverley coming back signal that? I think it probably does, because he's a serious politician. He's quite popular with Tory constituency associations. He has been around and about, I've noticed, as well as Jenrick, of course, out and about talking to people in the country. So I think it was right to bring him back. It hasn't set the world on fire. It hasn't even set my phone on fire.
It is interesting that those two, any regional Tory conference, I spoke at one a couple of months ago in Kent, and the following two speakers were Robert Jenrick and James Cleverley.
Yeah.
Can I make clear, I had no leadership ambitions by speaking at that
That's all in the rearview mirror now, isn't it, Ian?
It really is. Natasha?
I mean, it's just the deck chairs, Titanic, shuffling things around. The joke writes itself. I don't know.
But that's what we said about Keir Starmer when he was 1 year in.
Well, what do you mean by that? What do you mean?
Well, he nearly resigned as leader after 1 year as leader of the opposition. And when he did a reshuffle, people said exactly what you just said about Kemi Badenoch.
Yeah, well,
so I
think what my issue, when I've been in Parliament for a year and I've watched the Conservative Party over this time and thought they never did the bit where they sort of acknowledged they did something wrong and said sorry. They seem to have just jumped to the bit where they think we're all supposed to forget and move on. And so I just find it all a bit almost like Arlene, nobody cares outside of Westminster, but at the same time, it's frustrating to me to sit there and watch them have these, non-entity things happen and actually never actually just apologise and go, seriously, this is what we did wrong, this is how we would do it differently. And it's just, yeah.
I think that's a really interesting point which Natasha made, because when Kemi came in, I think there was a big attempt to do a significant mea culpa, and she was standing up at press conferences and saying, we got this wrong in immigration, we got this wrong in the economy. I think you're right, that strategy has since been dumped, and what they are now doing is very much saying, this is our attempted plan for the country, because they think that by going on about all the mistakes that they made, the public will be even less appealed to them than they were already. I think Kemi Badenoch today was a bit damned if you do, damned if you don't. The fact she's done a reshuffle 8 months in is clearly panicked and a recognition that things aren't going very swimmingly. But if you go along even further with, in the politest way possible, a bunch of Tory shadow cabinet ministers who have not been pulling their weight and have been failing to land blows in the government and punch the bruises where necessary, then the problem only perpetuates and get worse. I'm not sure that we've had the biggest clear out of those people that potentially we could have done. And I still think that the shadow cabinet has a long way to go in terms of getting public recognition. There was an Ipsos Mori poll, which got sent around today, showing public recognition of shadow cabinet ministers outside of Kemi Badenoch. And the top person was Robert Jenrick. And he was 18% of the public. 18%.
We see, just to confirm Arlene's point about Westminster bubble, I actually don't think any of what you've discussed is the most interesting thing about this reshuffle. I think the fact that Henry Newman is now the new Chief of Staff and Francis Maud is the sort of overseer of the leader's office, they are Govites. Michael Gove is in charge of the Conservative Party now.
That's not bubble at all, is it?
We can't discuss because Ben in Clacton wants to very briefly touch on another subject. Ben, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, panel. My question is, are the Epstein files Trump's Watergate?
Well, in addition to suing the Wall Street Journal and its owner Rupert Murdoch, Donald Trump has today called the coverage of his links to Jeffrey Epstein a witch hunt and nonsense, and is instead trying to urge reporters and his own supporters to focus on allegations of corruption which he's made against Barack Obama and other figures in the Democratic Party. 30 seconds each on this. You might all be relieved to know that's all we've got. Jack?
Well, I think it's a very interesting case, and I think that the point you would make about this is I think what a lot of people expected with some things that happened with Donald Trump is that the movement he created, the MAGA movement, eventually consumes the person that created it. And I think that is the serious danger now for Donald Trump. Lots of these conspiracists, lots of people on the right of politics in America who for years have thought that there's something seriously dodgy about what's in these Epstein files and the famous people linked to them. Trump does not want this to come out. They do. And there's a serious split, I think, not just at the top of the Republican Party, but the top of the Trump administration. And this could be the moment, whether or not Trump rides it out or whether or not he gets devoured by his own revolution. Let's see.
Natasha.
I'm going to, because we're pressed for time, say I don't know. But I don't know where this, I don't know where this ends. We'll see.
Something you have in common with Nigel Farage. He did that a lot with Laura Kuenssberg on Sunday.
Maybe I'll have the same kind of career.
Well, that's a bombshell. Arlene.
There certainly seems to be a very bad smell around all of this. This will develop in America and only the way it can develop in America with lots of legal cases and all the rest of it. So we have to be careful around all of that, as I'm sure LBC would want us to be. But I think that this is something that will just develop over the next couple of months.
I think he has got a problem. He's got a problem with the MAGA base that he's mishandled, regardless of whatever may be the truth of the dealings with Jeffrey Epstein. None of us really know. My sense is that he's embarrassed by it, that things don't look... But I kind of doubt that this is massive truther conspiracy that Donald Trump was incredibly culpable of something that would blow up his career. But the way he is handling it, because he is so thin-skinned about it, is, I think, beginning to set the MAGA movement against him, as Jack and others have pointed out. I think that is a dangerous moment for Donald Trump.
Right, our fun question from Maddie in Norwich. After the sad death of Ozzy Osbourne, if you could go back and binge watch one classic reality TV show, which one would it be? Anne?
Easy. I'm from Northwest Durham. My father was a proper Geordie from Gateshead, so I am doing Geordie Shore. In fact, I would audition if they would have me.
Is that a reality TV show?
Geordie Shore.
Was it?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah,
I'd say so. I'm just shocked that Anne's watched it.
So am I.
Certainly you have to do some things, right?
Well, it'll not surprise you to know, and I absolutely detest all sorts of reality TV, so I don't have any...
Have you ever been invited on one?
Well, no, and I wouldn't be going either, and I'll not be now, for sure.
Okay. Natasha?
I would go back to seasons 1 and 2 of The Real Housewives of Atlanta. Those women, before like the fame got to them, and it was all a bit kind of rough around the edges, I'd go back and binge watch that.
Jack?
Mine would be Below Deck. It's a fantastic series. I think still on.
Terrible.
I'm from the Isle of Wight, so a massive sailing fan, and I love watching all of the rows and whatever that goes on the boats. It's fantastic, and also all the horrible guests that they get on there who are just unbelievably rude. But it's quite fun watching.
We should a reality show shame people. You know, you asked his opinion. Let him enjoy the show.
Exactly.
Yeah,
but she's taking over already on her first show. Goodness me.
What about you?
What about? I like the original Big Brother.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to be on it.
Oh,
there we go. Well, anyone's listening.
Now it's time.
Yeah.
The truth will out.
Well, I've got an agent, but they've never got me on it.
Celebrity brother, of course, the celebrity brother.
Obviously, because I'm such a major celebrity. Right, thank you all very much indeed. Now, on tomorrow's show from 8 o'clock, we'll be hosting a live debate between the two teams bidding to be the next leader or co-leader of the Green Party. Zach Polanski will be here answering your questions, while the team of two Green MPs running to be its co-leaders, are you with me at the back? That's Adrian Ramsey and Dr. Ellie Chowns have chosen Adrian to join us in the studio. So Adrian and Zach will be here for 90 minutes from 8 o'clock tomorrow evening, answering your questions and putting forward their manifestos to be leader of the Green Party. Contain your excitement. Now, in the next hour, we're going to talk about Brewdog. Yes, we really are, because they're closing 10 bars, including their flagship location in Aberdeen, amid what they call extremely difficult environments for pubs and restaurants. Well, I want to know why you think this is happening. Are we to blame for this, basically? Are we not going to the pub as much as we used to? Are we not going to restaurants as much as we used to? Or are they pricing themselves out of the range of ordinary punters? I went out for dinner on Sunday night in a restaurant in a village near where I live. £575 the bill came to for 5 people. Not going back. Have you had a similar experience? 0345 6060 973.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, Ozzy Osbourne has died at the age of 76. The Black Sabbath frontman had Parkinson's disease after being diagnosed in 2019. But he still played a farewell gig to thousands of fans in his home city of Birmingham just weeks ago. Well, LBC spoke to his wife, Sharon, just before the gig.
It's very emotional for him. It's a great thing, but at the same time too, it's very sad because it's like put that full stop. And so after this, no more from Ozzy as far as live performances go. And so it's very emotional.
A report into the Unite Union has found it overpaid tens of millions of pounds for a major project delivered by a building company with ties to its former boss. It's claimed ex-General Secretary Len McCluskey also enjoyed flights on private jets and football tickets arranged by the Flanagan Group. Both have been approached for comment. LBC's political editor Natasha Clark has